She's not your responsibility. That was what Marcus Hale told himself the moment he saw her. He said it again when he got out of the car. The rain had been falling since early afternoon, the kind that didn't dramatic pour but just persisted, cold and indifferent, soaking everything it touched. Chicago in November had a particular cruelty to it, not the sharp cinematic cold of a snowstorm, but something duller, grayer, more exhausting. Marcus had been driving back from a dinner he hadn't wanted to attend, tie loosened, jacket tossed in the back seat, the kind of quiet that settles over a man when he's spent 3 hours performing warmth he doesn't feel. He was stopped at a red light on West Madison when he saw her. She was standing under the narrow overhang of a closed pharmacy, a reusable grocery bag clutched to her chest, a small child pressed against her side. The boy, maybe 4, maybe 5, had his face buried in her coat. She had one arm around him and the other stretched over his head, holding a paper bag above him like a makeshift umbrella. It was already soaked through, so was she. Her dark hair was plastered against her cheeks, her scrubs soaked through at the shoulders, her shoes leaving small wet prints on the concrete each time she shifted her weight. She wasn't crying, she wasn't asking for help, she was just standing there, jaw set, eyes fixed on the street, waiting. Marcus sat through the green light. A car behind him honked once. He didn't move. He didn't know why he pulled over. Later he would tell himself it was the kid, that no reasonable person drives past a soaked child at 9 o'clock at night and does nothing, that it had nothing to do with the way she stood, that particular posture of someone who has learned not to expect anyone to stop. He pulled the car to the curb and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" She looked at him the way people look at something that might bite them. Her arm tightened around the boy. "We're fine," she said. "You're standing in the rain." I noticed. Her voice was flat, not rude, just tired, the kind of tired that goes all the way down. He looked at the child. The boy had turned his face out slightly, peering at the car with large, dark eyes. "The bus isn't coming," Marcus said. "They rerouted everything past Halsted Fluting." She blinked. Something shifted in her expression, not defeat exactly, but the recognition of it approaching. "I can take you wherever you need to go," he said. "You can sit in the back. I'll stay on the passenger side if it makes you more comfortable. But I'm not going to leave a kid standing in this." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her son, who was shivering in a way he was trying very hard to hide. "Okay," she said quietly, "just to the corner of Pulaski and Ogden." He got out and opened the back door without another word. She guided the boy in first, then climbed in after him, pulling the door shut. Marcus got back in the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb. For a few blocks no one spoke. The rain drummed steadily against the roof. The heater hummed. "Thank you," she said finally from the back seat. He glanced in the rearview mirror. She was holding the boy against her with both arms now, her chin resting lightly on top of his head. The grocery bag sat at her feet. "Don't mention it," Marcus said. "I mean it. You didn't have to stop." He didn't answer that, because the honest response, "I almost didn't seem like the right thing to say." She told him her name when he asked for the cross street again. Elena Vasquez. She said it the way people say things they're not sure matter, briefly without offering more. The boy was named Danny. He had fallen mostly asleep by the time they reached her block, one small hand fisted in the front of her scrub top. Her building was a 3-flat on a quiet residential street, the kind of block where people left porch lights on. She thanked him again at the curb, shifted Danny onto her hip like she'd done it 10,000 times, and carried him toward the front door without looking back. Marcus sat there until the light above the entrance clicked off. Then he drove home. He told himself that was the end of it. Marcus Hale was 41 years old and had not, in recent memory, done anything without a reason. He had built Hale Logistics from a regional freight company into one of the largest supply chain operations in the Midwest, not through luck or charm, but through the precise application of logic to every decision he made. He was not a cold man, exactly. His employees would have said he was fair. His board would have said he was focused. His ex-wife, Claire, who had left 3 years ago with 2 suitcases and a carefully worded email he still hadn't finished reading, might have said something else. He lived alone in a high-rise in the West Loop. The apartment was large and clean and almost entirely silent. He had a housekeeper named Patricia who came on Tuesdays and left his refrigerator stocked with things he ate mechanically, without pleasure. He worked 12-hour days not because he had to anymore, but because the alternative, going home to that silence before he was tired enough to sleep through it, felt like standing at the edge of something. He didn't think about Elena Vasquez for almost a week. Then, on a Thursday morning, he was walking into the Walgreens on the corner near his office to pick up a prescription, and he saw her again. She was at the pharmacy counter in her scrubs, same dark hair, same posture, that particular stillness of someone accustomed to waiting. She had a prescription slip in one hand and was looking at her phone with an expression Marcus recognized, the expression of someone doing quiet arithmetic. She put the prescription slip back in her pocket. He watched her turn and walk toward the exit. He walked to the pharmacy counter. "The woman who just left," he said to the pharmacist, a young man with tired eyes. "She had a prescription." The pharmacist looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I can't." "She left without filling it." Marcus set his card on the counter. "Fill it and charge whatever it costs." "Sir, that's—" "Her name is on the slip. She'll come back for it." He paused. "Just tell her it was a pharmacy error, that it was prepaid by mistake." He didn't wait to see whether the man agreed. He picked up his own prescription and walked out. He didn't ask himself why he did it. That was the problem, maybe, he already knew. He saw her a third time at a community meeting he had no real business attending. His company had been reviewing a potential partnership with a nonprofit that provided job training and transitional housing on the West Side. His operations director had flagged it as a worthwhile investment. Marcus had intended to send a representative. Instead, he went himself, and he told himself it was due diligence. The meeting was held in the gym of a rec center on Kedzie. Folding chairs, bad lighting, a podium with a microphone that kept cutting out. Marcus stood near the back wall in a suit that cost more than the folding table up front, deeply aware that he was the most out-of-place person in the room. Elena Vasquez was at the front presenting. She was a social worker, he understood now, not just a nurse, or he had assumed incorrectly from the scrubs. She worked with the nonprofit's family stabilization program. She spoke without notes, clearly and without performance, in the way of someone who has given the same facts to so many people that they've become part of her own bones. 40% of the families we serve, she said, are one missed paycheck from eviction. Not one bad decision, one missed paycheck. She paused, let it land. These are people who work, who do everything right, and they still fall through every crack the system has to offer. She looked out at the room, not with pity, Marcus noticed, with something harder and quieter than pity. After the meeting, he introduced himself to the organization's director and wrote a check on the spot that made the man's hands shake slightly when he took it. He did not introduce himself to Elena. He was almost to his car when he heard her voice behind him. "You were at the back the whole time," she said, "and you left before the Q&A." He turned. She was standing on the sidewalk in a coat a size too big for her, a canvas tote over one shoulder, hands in her pockets. Her expression was somewhere between skeptical and curious. "I had what I needed," he said. She looked at him for a moment, then recognition crossed her face. "You're the man from the rain." "Marcus Hale." "I know who you are," she said, and the way she said it didn't sound like flattery. "My organization just got a very large anonymous donation." She tilted her head. "Was that you?" He didn't answer. She studied him. "Why?" "Because the work matters." "That's not a real answer." He looked at her. She didn't look away. Elena Vasquez, he was learning, had a way of holding eye contact that most people didn't. Not aggressive, just direct, like she was too tired to bother with the performance of looking away first. "Coffee," he said, "if you want a real answer." She considered him for longer than felt comfortable. "1 hour," she said finally. "I have to pick up Danny by 8. The coffee was at a diner 2 blocks away that smelled like burnt toast and dish soap, and was, without question, the most comfortable Marcus had felt in a restaurant in years. She ordered black coffee and a slice of pie she'd clearly been thinking about since she walked in. He ordered nothing, then changed his mind and ordered the same. She told him about Danny, 4 and a half, obsessed with garbage trucks, recently diagnosed with a mild speech delay they were working on together with a therapist who came twice a week. She talked about her job in the straightforward way of someone who doesn't need you to be impressed by it. She had been doing this work for 6 years. She had done it through a breakup, through her mother's illness, through 3 different apartments, as rents climbed and her salary didn't. "Why do you keep doing it?" he asked. She looked at him like the question surprised her. "Because someone has to." "That's not why people keep doing things that cost them this much." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mom worked 2 jobs my whole childhood, cleaning offices at night, cashiering during the day. She never asked anyone for anything. When she got sick, really sick, she didn't know how to. Didn't know what she was even entitled to ask for." She turned her coffee cup slowly. I spent weeks just navigating paperwork for her. Insurance appeals, Medicaid application. She almost lost her housing while she was in the hospital because nobody told her there were protections in place." She looked up. "I do this because I needed someone to do it for my mother, and nobody did." Marcus said nothing for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Don't be, it made me useful." He looked at her across the table and felt something shift in him, not the sharp, negotiable pull of attraction, but something slower and more structural, like a load-bearing wall discovering it had been shouldering more than its share for a long time. He walked her to her car at 7:50. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the cold. "The donation," she said. "I'm not going to pretend it wasn't you." "You can pretend whatever you want." She almost smiled. "Why, Marcus Hale?" He thought about his answer for a moment. "Because I've spent a long time giving money to things that needed it and felt nothing. That meeting was the first time in a while I felt something." She looked at him, then she nodded once, got in her car and drove away. He stood on the sidewalk longer than was necessary. It became a pattern the way real things do, not by agreement but by accumulation. A text here, a meeting that ran long and ended with both of them walking to the same corner. He started showing up to her organization's public events with the focused neutrality of a man conducting research, and she started letting him sit beside her at the back of the room without commenting on it. He learned things about her by watching. That she ate lunch standing up at her desk more often than not. That she was chronically 10 minutes late to everything except her son's school pickup, for which she was always early. That she kept a photo of her mother tucked into the corner of her work ID badge, the edges worn soft from handling. He did not tell her about the other things he did quietly in the background. The call to the school district about Danny's speech therapy coverage, a billing dispute she'd mentioned once, offhandedly, that he had resolved through 2 phone calls, and a letter that cost him nothing but took her problem off the board entirely. The discreet conversation with a city housing contact about a zoning issue threatening 2 of the program's client families. He kept his hands out of her eyeline. He told himself it was because he didn't want credit. That was partly true. The other part, the part he didn't examine too closely, was that doing it this way felt sustainable. If she didn't know, she couldn't leave because of it. Couldn't feel obligated, couldn't look at him differently. He was protecting himself and calling it protecting her, and somewhere underneath all of it, he knew that. One evening he picked her up from the hospital. She'd covered a shift for a colleague, something she did often, too often, and she fell asleep in the passenger seat before they'd gone 4 blocks. He drove past her street and kept going, taking a longer route through the park, the kind of loop that had no practical purpose. The city moved quietly past the windows. The lights blurred at the edges, and Elena Vasquez slept with her head tilted back and her hands loose in her lap, and Marcus kept his eyes on the road and his breathing even, and didn't ask himself what he was doing. At her building, he sat in the car for a moment before gently saying her name. She woke up quickly, the way people do who are used to being needed. "Sorry," she said immediately. "Don't apologize." She looked at him for a moment, slightly disoriented, then gathered her bag. At the door, she turned back. "Marcus." "Yeah. You always take the long way." He didn't answer. She went inside. He drove home and stood in his kitchen for a long time, lights off, looking at nothing. The call came on a Tuesday morning. His assistant knocked twice before opening the door, which meant it was something real. "It's the hospital on Illinois Street," she said carefully. A woman named Elena Vasquez listed your number as an emergency contact. The drive took 11 minutes. He did not remember making most of the turns. She was in a bed in the ER, conscious but pale, an IV line running into her arm, a nurse taking notes at the bedside. Danny was with her neighbor. A colleague had found her in the break room, her head down on the table, and initially thought she was sleeping. She wasn't sleeping. Severe dehydration, the doctor told him in the hall. Low blood pressure. She'd been working a caseload 30% over capacity for 4 months, skipping meals, running on coffee, and whatever she could manage between home visits. Her body had simply stopped cooperating. When Marcus walked back into the room, Elena was looking at the ceiling with an expression he recognized. The look of someone taking inventory of all the things that weren't getting done because they were lying here. "Hey," he said. She turned her head. Something in her face shifted, not relief exactly, but the specific relaxation of someone who has been bracing for bad news and sees a familiar face instead. "You didn't have to come," she said. "You listed me." That was I wasn't thinking clearly when they asked. He sat down in the chair beside the bed. "I know." She was quiet for a moment, then very quietly. "I know. I don't do this. I don't fall apart." "Elena," his voice came out steadier than he felt. "You didn't fall apart. Your body made a decision you weren't willing to make." She looked at the ceiling again. A few seconds passed. "Danny is going to be scared," she said. "I'll call your neighbor. I'll explain. He can stay the night if you need, and I'll pick him up in the morning and bring him here so he can see you." She turned her head and looked at him. "You would do that?" He looked back at her. "Yes." Her eyes filled. She looked away again quickly, jaw tight. "I've been doing this alone for so long," she said very quietly, like she was saying it to herself. "I don't know how to. I don't know what to do when someone—" She stopped. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "Just stay in the bed." She almost laughed, almost. Then a tear slipped sideways across her cheek and she didn't wipe it. He reached over and took her hand, not carefully, firmly, the way you hold something you're not planning to let go of. She didn't pull away. They stayed like that for a long time, the machines beeping softly, the hallway busy outside the door, and Marcus held her hand and looked at the middle distance and felt, for the first time in years, entirely sure of where he was supposed to be. She came to stay with him while she recovered. That was how they phrased it, while she recovered. As if it were temporary, as if both of them didn't understand it wasn't. Danny moved in with the ease that children have when they feel safe, claiming the guest room and immediately covering the bedside table, with a small collection of toy trucks he'd brought in a backpack. Marcus, who had not lived with anyone in 3 years, and had not lived with a child ever, found himself Googling age-appropriate breakfasts at 6 in the morning, and purchasing a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship, and saying things like "buddy" without planning to. Elena watched all of this from the couch with an expression Marcus couldn't read, amused maybe, careful, certainly. They fell into a rhythm that had no name. He cooked on the nights she was too tired. She made coffee the right way, which he hadn't realized he'd been getting wrong for years. Danny showed him, with great seriousness, the optimal configuration of toy trucks on the coffee table, and Marcus rearranged his home to accommodate it. But there was still a wall. He felt it most in the evenings after Danny was in bed, when the apartment went quiet and they sat on opposite ends of the couch with books or phones, close enough to touch, not touching. He wanted to say things. He had spent 41 years saying nothing, and the habit was deeply grooved. She caught him in his office one night, standing in front of the window. He had a framed photo on his desk, his father's old company, a picture from the early days, men standing in front of a row of trucks. It was not a warm picture. He kept it because it was evidence, proof that things could be built. She stood in the doorway. "You stare out that window a lot." Thinking. About what? He looked at the photo instead of the window. "My father ran a freight company, not like this. 12 trucks, 1 warehouse. He was practical, unsentimental." He paused. He thought feelings were a distraction from the work. Elena came and stood beside him, not close. "Did you believe him?" "For a long time." He looked at the photo. "He died before I made my first million. We weren't close the way. We just weren't close. And I think I kept building because it was the only thing I knew how to do that he'd taught me." She was quiet. "I don't know how to be close," he said. "I know how to be useful. I know how to solve things. But He stopped. The words were right there and wouldn't come. Elena turned to look at him. "Marcus." He looked at her. "I know what you've been doing," she said carefully. "Danny's therapy, the billing dispute, the housing issue." She watched his face. "I figured it out." He said nothing. "I'm not angry," she said. "I just want you to know that you don't have to do it from a distance." She paused. "You're allowed to just be here." The silence between them stretched. It was the kind of silence that has weight. "I don't know how to not lose people," he said finally, and the words came out rough and unplanned, the way honest things do. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Neither do I. Danny's dad left when he was 8 months old. My mom died before I could tell her she'd done enough." She paused. "But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere, and I need to know if you can." She stopped, started again. "I need to know if you can decide to stay." He looked at her. The city hummed below the window. Danny was asleep in the next room. "I'm already decided," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she crossed the remaining distance between them and put her arms around him, and Marcus Hale, who had not let anyone hold him in longer than he could clearly remember, put his arms around her and held on. She left anyway. It happened the way things like this happen, not through a fight, but through an accumulation of silence that turned from comfortable to something else. A trip, she mentioned, a family thing in Phoenix her aunt needed help with, a week that turned into 3. He didn't ask her to stay. She didn't ask him to ask. The apartment felt like a held breath after she left. Danny's truck formation was still on the coffee table. Her coffee was still in the cabinet. He didn't move any of it. He worked. He did what he knew how to do. He flew to 3 cities in 2 weeks and closed deals he didn't care about and ate meals he didn't taste. He called her twice. Once she answered and they talked for an hour about nothing, warm and easy, the way they always were. Once she didn't and he didn't leave a voicemail. A month passed, then another. He understood slowly that he had done it again. Had been present in every practical way and absent in the way that actually mattered. Had solved everything except the thing that needed to be said. His assistant, a sharp woman named Ruth, who had worked for him for 7 years and had the particular courage of someone who knows they're excellent at their job, set a coffee on his desk one morning and said, without preamble, "You've been impossible since she left." He looked up. "I'm not saying that to be unkind," Ruth said. "I'm saying it because you're going to lose the Tokyo partnership if you don't get your head back, and also because you clearly love her and you should probably do something about that." He sat with that for a moment. "She's in Phoenix," he said. "Flights leave every few hours," Ruth said, and walked out. He didn't go to Phoenix. He waited because he didn't trust himself to show up right, and he needed to show up right. He wrote things down instead, not a letter, just notes, pieces of what he wanted to say, the way you practice something important before you have to do it in front of someone who matters. She came back in March, the way Chicago comes back in March, slowly, reluctantly, with patches of cold still hanging in the corners. She texted him that she was back, that Danny was back in preschool, that she'd be at the rec center Thursday for a community board meeting. He went on Thursday. She was at the front again, same posture, same directness. She saw him at the back and acknowledged him with a slight tilt of her head, the small economy of a person who communicates a lot without much visible motion. After the meeting, she came and stood beside him. "You came," she said. "I wanted to say something," he said. She waited. "I'm in love with you," he said. "I've been in love with you since approximately the 3rd time I saw you, and I've spent most of that time finding complicated ways to be around you without saying so, which was cowardly, and I'm sorry for it." She looked at him. "I don't know how to do this perfectly," he said. "I don't have a long track record of getting this right, but I know that when you're not there, nothing functions correctly, and I've tried fixing it the usual way, and it doesn't work." Something moved across her face. "I'm not asking you to trust that I'll be perfect," he said. "I'm asking you to trust that I'm going to keep choosing this, you, and Danny," he paused, "if that's something you still want." She looked at him for a long moment. The room was emptying out around them, chairs scraping, voices carrying, the ordinary noise of a building returning to itself. "You wrote it down first, didn't you?" she said, "before you said it." He blinked. "How did you?" "Because you don't say anything until you know exactly what you mean." She looked at him with something that was almost a smile. "I don't need perfect. I just needed you to actually show up." "I'm here," he said. "I know." She stepped closer. "I'm choosing this too." He took her hand. Outside, through the gym's high windows, the last of the winter light was fading into something softer, the city shifting toward evening with its particular, patient patience. He had not stopped for anyone in a long time, had built his life around the certainty that not stopping was the only way to keep moving. Elena Vasquez had made him pull over, had made him sit through a green light and forget, briefly, the logic of moving on. And standing in that gym, her hand in his, Danny's pickup in 40 minutes, the rest of their ordinary life waiting just outside the door. Marcus Hale understood that the most important decisions he had ever made had looked, from the outside, like nothing much at all. A man pulling over in the rain. A cup of coffee that ran over by an hour. A woman who stood in his doorway and told him he was allowed to just be there. He had spent 41 years building things that lasted. He knew, finally, the difference between what he'd built before and what this was. This was the one he was going to keep. I think about the moment Marcus sat through a green light a lot. Not the grand gestures, not the donation, not the hospital, not the speech at the end. Just that. A man in a car who had somewhere to be, choosing to stay still for a few extra seconds because something in him wasn't ready to leave. Most of us have had that moment, the green light we sat through, the person we almost kept driving past. What strikes me about Marcus isn't that he was generous, it's that he was honest, eventually, about why he kept showing up. For a long time he told himself it was practical, logical. He was solving problems, paying bills, making calls. He had language for all of it that didn't require him to be vulnerable, and I think a lot of us do that. We find ways to care for people that keep us at arm's length from admitting we need them back. That's not a character flaw. That's fear wearing the clothes of competence, and fear, when it goes unnamed long enough, becomes a habit. Marcus almost lost everything that mattered because he was so practiced at being useful that he forgot how to be present. What Elena asked of him wasn't grand. She didn't need him to be perfect. She just needed him to show up without the armor on. To say the thing out loud instead of funding it from a distance. There's something in that I keep coming back to. The idea that real integrity isn't just doing right by someone when no one's watching. It's also doing right by yourself, admitting what you want, admitting what you're afraid of. Marcus had spent 40 years being disciplined and decisive in every room except the one that mattered most. Choosing to finally speak, that took more courage than anything he built. And Elena, I think about what it means to keep going the way she did. 2 jobs, a kid, a caseload that was quietly breaking her body, and still she showed up every day with that particular fierceness of someone who has decided the work is worth it. That's not martyrdom. That's a kind of quiet strength that doesn't announce itself. She knew what it cost her. She did it anyway, not because she didn't value herself, but because she understood something about the world that not enough people do. That the point of building your own resilience isn't to prove you don't need anyone. It's so that when someone finally does show up, you're still whole enough to let them in. The smartest thing either of them did wasn't a business decision or a perfectly timed conversation. It was paying attention. Marcus noticed her before he had a reason to. Elena noticed the long way home before he ever admitted it. They both kept watching, kept thinking, kept asking better questions than the ones they started with. That kind of attention, the discipline of actually seeing people, of staying curious about them instead of filing them away, that's its own form of intelligence. And it's rarer than it should be. I don't think Marcus and Elena got lucky. I think they each made a series of small decisions over a long time to be the kind of person worth staying for. That's a thing you can choose, too. The light is green. You can sit in it a little longer.